Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what part of the world you're in. I'm Maria Volpe. I'm a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, the City University of New York. This is our 290th gathering of the Roundtable breakfast that I started after 9/11. This session is co-sponsored by the City University of New York Dispute Resolution Center at John Jay College and the Association for Conflict Resolution of Greater New York. These sessions are recorded, and all of the recordings are posted on our YouTube channel. Nikki will put that in the chat so that you can access it. And we also post the recordings on the websites of the co-sponsors, ACRGNY and the CUNY Dispute Resolution Center. Each month, these sessions are organized and convened by a wonderful group of colleagues that I have the joy of working with: Matthew Latimer, Nikki Borofsky, Sherston Pugh, and Chloe Choi. We wouldn't have these each month if we didn't have such a wonderful team. I'm going to turn it over to Sherston for just a very brief announcement from Columbia University. Sherston is one of our co-conveners and a member of the ACR-GMY board, and then we will turn it over to our speaker, Sherston.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maria, and welcome everyone. I know we have a really great global community on today, so it's really good to see you all. As Maria mentioned, my name is Sherston Pugh. I'm on the ACR-GNY board, and I'm also the Deputy Program Director of Columbia University's Negotiation and Conflict Resolution Master's Program. And so with that hat on right now, I wanted to invite everyone to our virtual capstone presentations that will be taking place tomorrow, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern. I'm going to pop the link in the chat. We hope you can join us. They're all virtual and obviously free, open to the public, but it is really a showcase of our graduate students' research. They've been working on their capstone projects and thesis for over a year. So if you want to come learn something new and cheer them on, we would love to see you there. So thank you very much. And also, we're so thrilled that Susan Levin is here this morning because she's also one of our faculty members as well. So thank you all.
And thank you, Sherston. Before I turn it back to Nikki for a formal introduction of Susan, I wanted to thank Susan Levin for being with us. And I've heard her speak before. We are in for a wonderful morning on neuroscience and the intersection with this world of conflict and conflict resolution that we focus on. Thank you so, so much, Susan, for being with us this morning, and looking forward to hearing your presentation. And now I'm going to turn it over to Nikki, who will formally introduce Susan. Nikki, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Maria. And thank you and welcome to all of you. I've got a very brief introduction of our speaker today that really ties into what we were speaking about earlier in the session, if you were with us in the intro. Change is upon us right now, and change creates conflict. And conflict also demands change. It's a cycle that many of us in the conflict resolution field know very intimately. And today we're taking that cycle down to the cellular level. We are very lucky to have Susan Levin here to remind us that resistance to change isn't just psychological, it's neurological. Susan is the founder of Dialogue for Solutions, and she spent the last 30 years helping people, teams, and organizations navigate transitions in more than 40 countries, probably some of yours. Her work is grounded in cross-cultural intelligence, organizational development, and conflict transformation. But what makes her work especially relevant today is the way she integrates neuroscience in the art of change. So in addition to leading global consulting work, Susan teaches at Columbia University's Negotiation and Conflict Resolution Program. Thank you to Sherston for facilitating the connection there, where she focuses on the neurobiological dimensions of conflict. You've got to think amygdala, anothoracal so many terms that you'll be exposed to if you're not already familiar with, and some of the doctors on this call probably know them intimately well today. She's here to help us understand what happens before the behavior shows up in the room and how that knowledge can help us to intervene with greater empathy and clarity. This session today will explore the flight, freeze, cascade and the neurochemistry of rejection, why decision-making plummets under threat. We'll also learn her hands-on framework, the power interest matrix, that'll help us map stakeholder dynamics during the organizational change. And you'll leave with new language, new tools, and a deeper sense of what it means to meet resistance, not just with strategy, but with insight, neurological insight into both others and into yourself. Please join me in officially welcoming the inspiring Susan Levin. Susan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Nikki. What a wonderful introduction and summary of what I want to talk about today. It's great to be here. Pleasure to be in this company of so many amazing conflict resolution practitioners. And I have attended some of these roundtables. I always learn a lot from these sessions. And I know there is a lot of experience and expertise in this room that I'd like to tap into. As I was listening to people speaking right before we started the official program, like Jeremy and Valeria, clearly there's a lot of knowledge here too about neuroscience. And so I will present what I know about neuroscience, particularly, as Nikki said, how to navigate change through the lens of conflict. So I'd like to start with a quick exercise to illustrate the impact of change. And I'd like everybody please to get a pen or pencil, might have one in hand, and a piece of paper or somewhere to write. So if you could please just get yourself a pen, a writing implement, and somewhere to write. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to please sign your name as you usually would. Just normally sign your name. Give you a moment to do that. All right. And now what I'd like you to do is take the pen and put it in the other hand and sign your name. Okay, how did that go? I'm seeing some smiles, some grins. What actually happened there when you made that switch? Feel free to put it into chat, or you can raise your electronic hand so we can call on you. What happened? It was harder, doesn't look so nice. Unfortunately, oh, ambidextrous. That's fantastic. Lucky you. Not very readable. Focused concentration, awkward. You had to stop and think. It wasn't as natural as just your regular signature. It was slow, took a second or two. Wasn't sure how to do that, Miriam says. Oh, it was fun. Oh, Roberta, I'm glad to hear that. You felt incompetent. Yeah, absolutely. Second signature is, oh, I'm sorry. Heath, that makes a difference if you have a stroke. Yeah, sorry to hear that. Well, it's really interesting, isn't it, that just a really small effort like this, a small change, can be challenging and really spark a lot of these different emotions. So let's pull up the slides, and I'm going to go over the agenda. So next, please. So next slide. Great. Thank you so much. So what we're going to cover here is we're going to explore neuroscience so we can know how humans are hardwired to resist change. And we're also going to see how change can lead to conflict. And when there's conflict, it requires a shift and transition. We're going to learn about the power interest matrix to address, particularly during organizational change when there is conflict. And then at the very end, I'm going to ask you all to develop an action step, just one thing that you're taking away from this session that you can put into practice for yourselves at the end. So understanding instinctual reactions generated by brain activity can really provide insights into our own behavior as mediators and peace builders. And that greater self-awareness can help us anticipate our automatic responses so we can be better prepared to get grounded and be as neutral as possible. It can help us recognize what clients are going through as they grapple with change that results from conflict. Next slide. So while I'm not a neuroscientist, but I am fascinated, as many of you have expressed, by neuroscience, and I do incorporate it into my work and my course at Columbia University. And so, as you may know, neuroscience is the multidisciplinary study of the structure and function of the nervous system and the brain, and how it shapes thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And the fact that we are programmed by the functions of the brain, I really think is a great leveler for humanity because it impacts everyone the same, no matter what your background is or where you come from. So the key is to be aware of how the brain determines our emotions and our resulting actions. So to begin, let's look at the basic biology of the brain that offers a window into our initial response to something that is new and different, which is often perceived as a threat. There's a part of our brain, which I've heard reference to already, called the amygdala, which means almond-shaped in Greek, and it's located deep in the cerebrum, and it has evolved with us through human evolution as a survival mechanism. The amygdala is part of the limbic system, which is a collection of brain structures involved in emotions, memory, and motivation. It's also known as the reptilian brain. It's the fight, flight, freeze, or appease center that you may have heard of. It alerts us that we're in danger and we need to protect ourselves. And so part of the amygdala's job is to detect and react to even the smallest change. And it assumes the worst will happen until new and more encouraging evidence emerges. So what we do is we automatically go to the worst case scenario right away. Next slide. So when we were cave people, if the saber-toothed tiger was ready to attack, we were in survival mode by fighting back, running away, or not moving. And so as a result, the amygdala increases the blood flow that prepares the large muscles to get ready to run. So within about 20 milliseconds, our body is flooded with cortisol, which is the hormone that's released with stress, and epinephrine, which is also known as adrenaline, which is a natural painkiller. Adrenaline increases the lung capacity to ensure the body has the energy it needs. And this flood of stress hormones creates other sensations like tension in our solar plexus or our limbs. Our voice can get higher or lower or crack. We may notice that like our face is flushed or our throat constricts or the neck or jaw tightens. And we are then in the grip of a highly efficient but prehistoric set of physiological responses. And all these sensations are designed to move us to action. So in about 300 milliseconds, the neurotransmitter travels to the prefrontal cortex of the brain, and it's responsible for our rational, logical decision-making, memory, and executive functioning. However, the prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop until we're in our mid to late 20s. So if kids that age do something really goofy, it's not their fault, it's their brain's fault. But don't tell them if you have kids that age, like I do. Just kidding. They have to take responsibility too, right? So similarly, it's one reason why car rental companies don't allow drivers under 25 years old to rent cars, because they tend to make bigger risks. They take bigger risks as their prefrontal cortex is developing. So today we may not be physically threatened, though we can feel emotionally charged when our amygdala is on high alert. So I have an example of that when a client texted me and she said, I have to talk to you right away in confidence. And so immediately my amygdala was hijacked and I went to the worst possible scenario and I thought I must have done something wrong. But it turns out it was something involving another colleague and it had nothing to do with me. But my brain made up all kinds of stories in my head, which turned out to be wrong, fortunately. Next slide. So let's explore the role of the amygdala when encountering people who are different than us. Our instinctual brain takes over and we feel threatened. And if this person is not of our tribe, our survival impulse is to reject him or her. And knowing this is an immediate physiological reaction to difference can help us understand why we may not initially accept people when we first meet them. So since we're on autopilot, it's really not of our own volition initially. And I was explaining this to a coaching client, and she was surprised to learn that reaction that she has, where her amygdala is triggered, is not her choice. Her autopilot button is pushed. However, we don't have to succumb to the power of the amygdala and stay stuck there. We can make a conscious shift to move beyond that, stay curious to learn more, to connect, and find common ground so we can move beyond our physiological limitation. And as conflict resolution practitioners, we strive to do that for our clients, to find the common ground so they can operate in that zone of agreement to move to resolution of the issue. However, before that, they are dealing with change that they're hardwired to resist, and that change can cause conflict. So knowing that can help us better understand the dynamics of the parties and even empathize more with what they're going through. So let me ask you about your experience. And I want to know, when are times when your amygdala was triggered by something and your fight or flight mode kicked into high gear? So let's launch a poll to get a sense of what you perhaps have experienced. And so Nikki's going to pull up the poll, which is going to ask you, which of the following situations have you experienced and felt like your amygdala was triggered? And
So
you can use as many as apply.
you should see the poll on your screen now. Susan, I apologize, but since it's the lizard brain, I made a little comic of lizards to accompany it.
Oh, I love it. That's fantastic. Yes, I see that. All right. So the options are: you've been criticized by someone, you've lost your job, which during these turbulent times has happened to many people. You didn't get promoted, you dealt with an unwelcome change, you were rejected from a group, someone didn't respond to your email, someone took credit for your work. So feel free to click on as many of those situations as apply to you. I see we're having some great people are doing that. The results are coming in. Excellent. Lots of criticized by someone. Sure. Happens all the time. Okay, so let's see. I see criticized by someone, dealt with an unwelcome change. Someone took credit for your work, and then you were rejected from a group. Yeah, clearly.
I'm sorry, but I don't have all those choices. I only have 3. So,
Oh,
yeah. So can it be rescind? Because I don't have all that.
okay.
It might be a question of scrolling. What I'll do is I'll post a text version in the chat, and we can kind of integrate your response there, because it's something out of our control. It has to do with your Zoom client on your end. But let me do that as a backup.
Thank you so much, Nikki.
Show the
Yeah,
results.
maybe, yeah, scrolling down. Results would be, shall we see the results?
Sharing the
Okay,
results now.
thank you so much. All right, wow. So really criticized by someone is at the top, and then followed by dealing with an unwelcome change. Someone took credit for my work, rejected from a group. Yes, we have representation in all of those categories for sure. And so we certainly shows how much we have all experienced one of these. And of course, there are many other circumstances where that amygdala would get triggered and emotions can be high. Yes, I see taking credit for my work does set my amygdala off, of course. Oh, I see Federal Criminal Youthful Offender Act, under age 25 allows less serious punishment. Thank you for that, John. Okay, wow. Well, thank you so much for participating in that poll, just to see and hear what people's experiences are. So next slide, please. So it's really important to pay attention to how you feel physically, and awareness of that, those feelings in your body, the somatic, soma meaning body, is so important. You want to notice how your emotions manifest in a physical way. And this is an excellent resource. It's a book called Your Body is Your Brain by Amanda Blake. And I'm just going to read this quote on the slide. So, your body is the seat of a powerful intelligence that helps you navigate your most important experiences and relationships. In a very real sense, your body is your social and emotional sense organ. It is the lens through which you perceive your relational world and the instrument by which you act in it. So it is really important to pay attention, because we feel these sensations when we get criticized, when people take credit for our work, when we don't have a welcome change, and we feel them first in our body. So very important to pay attention to that, so that you have these indicators, and then you can be more aware. And also, you may not see it in the parties you're working with and trying to help them navigate conflict. But knowing that that's something that can come up can provide more information for you in terms of maybe understanding some of the nonverbal communication. So let's take a look at these fascinating neurotransmitters on the next slide. And these are chemical messages that your body can't function without. They carry these chemical signals from one neuron or nerve cell to the next cell, muscle, or gland. Now, the good news is we've got brain plasticity, so we can change the neural pathways. We can even grow new pathways by exercising the brain like a muscle. And we can do that. We can learn new things like a new language, do those crossword puzzles. Anybody into Wordle? So keep that brain active is really important to increase those synapses that run through the brain. So in fact, to your brain, the same regions are activated when we experience physical and social pain. So looking at the next slide, there was a study at Case Western Reserve University, and they found that exposure to rejection led participants to have an immediate drop in reasoning by 30% and a drop in IQ by 25%. So rejection, which criticizing someone's a form of rejection, is inevitable. We all have experienced it. We're bound to feel that pain at times. The question is, how do you bounce back? How do you pivot and tap into your resilience as quickly as possible? And in a mediation, parties are experiencing this pain as they negotiate back and forth, particularly when emotions are really highly charged. So one approach you can use to slow your reaction down is the PRC method. That stands for pause, reflect, and choose on the next slide. So what you do first is you take that deep breath to give some time for the neurotransmitters to go and move the messages from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, where you can be more rational and logical. It also sends oxygen into the bloodstream, which can be carried into our cells. So I really like that adage that says, go slow to go faster. So just by slowing down in a very tense situation, taking a collective deep breath can be really useful. So if you'd like to join me for a deep breath, feel free. We're going to do that in a moment. And if not, feel free to just pause and reflect. So get comfortable and go ahead, put your feet on the floor if you wish, and let's take that deep breath together. Let's breathe in through the nose. And breathe out. And I hope that feels helping you to be even more grounded. So in the midst of conflict, to be able to do that can really be helpful. So in the PRC method, you're taking that deep breath, and you don't have to be on automatic pilot. You have a choice to do something differently here. And you don't necessarily have to respond immediately most of the time. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you just have to be quick on your seat. And you want to reflect on your reaction. Why do you think you are having those kinds of emotions and feelings? What is coming up for you? Why might the other person or persons be responding in the way that they are? And really think about in the moment, if you can, to zoom out, determine what's going on, the circumstances that caused your reaction, and to choose an appropriate way forward. So you want to consider your usual patterns. And then you want to think about, how might I do some things differently? How might I reframe the situation? And I don't have to be necessarily stuck in the same old ways that aren't serving me very well. So what can I do differently for greater impact? So I'd like you to just think about a situation in the past where your amygdala was triggered and reflecting on why, so that you can be ready for the next time it happens, and think about what you want to do differently. So I hope that keeping the PRC method in mind in the midst of mediating a conflict, or if you're embroiled in one yourself, and for others that you are trying to guide, just can help you be more grounded and present for the parties, which is, of course, so important when we're in the midst of resolving the conflict. So let's continue dissecting, so to speak, different parts of the brain. And next slide. I see it. Thank you. Aside from the amygdala, there are other parts of the brain that I'd like to talk about that dictate our behavior and reactions to change. So the basal ganglia is that light blue circular part located near the center of your brain. And its purpose is to save energy. And it ensures that the more we do something, the less cognitive energy it takes as we create patterns and behaviors. So it frees the brain space to spend more time learning and analyzing. And habits are built through repetition. And it takes about 40 to 50 repetitions on average to establish a new habit. So our brain likes routine. And moving on to another part of the brain, next slide, is the habenula. It's near the thalamus, deep inside the brain, and it moderates our behavior by releasing chemicals like dopamine and serotonin, which are often called the feel-good chemicals. And that happens when we do something right, or we're feeling the situation is going well, and it's how our brain rewards behavior. But on the other hand, if we do something that fails and doesn't work, the habenula suppresses the flow of these feel-good chemicals and makes us feel bad. So it rewards good choices and encourages repetitive, successful behaviors while helping us to avoid punishment and failure. And during a change initiative, when change kicks in, the habenula becomes very active because change can create chances to fail. Learning new systems, procedures, new roles and responsibilities really challenge existing patterns, and they can lead to resistance. So I have an example to illustrate this. I was consulting with an international organization that was restructuring and changing the way that the office is organized. And some staff preferred the way things were, and they liked it the old way. They weren't very receptive to a new way of doing things, but they were used to the habits created by their habenulas. So they had to make a change ultimately, and it wasn't easy. And so in a change initiative like that, it's so important to continually communicate about what's happening and why, and really essential to keep staff informed, right? Otherwise, rumors persist and they're very hard to dispel. So let's take a look at, and I'm seeing some great resources in chat. Thank you so much. The Power of Habit. And Nikki's doing a great job getting those links in there. Thank you. So another important part of the brain is the entorhinal cortex, and it's like an internal GPS system. It helps us navigate through physical space and get around. And these are mental maps that form, and they help us create a sense of belonging. And you know, as social animals, we humans, we have a great need to belong to communities. So this entorhinal cortex creates mental maps of assumptions and beliefs that guide our behavior. And moments of insights create a whole new web of neural connections in the brain. So if you experience a change in your office, your organization, or your personal life, it can interrupt that feeling of being part of a community. And the physical moving around of workplaces can disrupt that mental map you have of where you need to be. And we create these social maps of connection. And when they're shifted, the entorhinal does some heavy lifting. And we know there's constant change. We have come out of a very difficult time in COVID, where often people are working remotely, and then some people are going back to offices. And there's so much shifting, and there's so much transition, and our brain operates in different ways that makes it really hard sometimes to adapt. So the amygdala also receives numerous connections from the hippocampus. Next slide. And the hippocampus is involved in storing and retrieving memories. And so the connection to the amygdala is one of strong emotions that can be triggered by these memories. And the hippocampus also specializes in processing sets of stimuli, like the context of a situation. And so it's because of the hippocampus, its close connections with the amygdala, that the entire context associated with the traumatic event can provoke anxiety. And memories can certainly surface during a conflict when people can be very attached to their narrative or their stories, as you well know. And they can recollect what happened in situations differently. And of course, when they see those things differently, that can lead to disagreement, argument, and sometimes being further entrenched in their own points of view during a mediation. So while we all have these parts of our brain, there are some differences in brain structures and genetics. So on the next slide, some people may have a gene variant, which is called the DRD4-7R. And that indicates that those people who have this tend to be more open-minded and flexible, and they like new experiences. They tend to engage in riskier behavior, And other people who have larger amygdala structures will have more of a tendency to be fearful and want greater stability, control, and authority, which is super interesting. And that's according to Mari Fitstuff, who wrote a great book called Our Brains at War. And she's done a lot of studying conflict in Northern Ireland. I know we have someone from Ireland on the call here. And I'll share that resource and some others at the end of the presentation. And it's thought that 1 in 5 people are thought to have this gene variant. So I see a question here, who created PRC? I actually put that together from a variety of sources. And so, certainly deep breathing is something that we are familiar with and makes a lot of sense. So I've adapted it from various sources. Is the test to determine the gene variant similar to super testers? Jess, I'm not sure about that. Is there something you can share with us to give us more information on that? If you'd like to come off a mute and share that.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Susan. Super testers is this idea of like the cilantro soap taste. And I wondered if, because of the statistic of 1 in 5, with very similar kind of descriptions to what you're talking about with this gene variant, if they might be linked, or if there's a different way of knowing whether somebody has that characteristic.
I think that's a very interesting question, and I'm not sure of the answer to that. I don't know if anybody else on the call would know. Well, let us keep that in mind and see if I could look further into that and get back to you on that afterward, in fact. Okay. Oh, super tasters, is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yes.
We'll look. Okay. Let me see if I can find out more information on that, or if anybody else has something, feel free to put it in chat. All right. So just when you thought you had a handle on one brain, neuroscience explains that there are 2 more brains. And on the next slide, we can see that in addition to the head brain or cephalic brain, we have a heart or cardiac brain and a gut or enteric brain. So each has sensory and motor neurons. They have ganglia, neurotransmitters that process information, store it, and access it when needed. So the head brain, as you can imagine, it's used for thinking, cognitive perception, and creativity. And the heart brain processes emotions, values, and connections with others. That's where passion and compassion reside. Now, our gut brain is designed to focus on ourselves and our self-preservation, and it's the root of courage. So one way the gut brain influences the cardiac brain is through the vagus nerve, you may have heard about. And that is tasked with regulating critical body functions such as heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, digestion, and the immune system. It kind of goes from the brain down to the gut through the body. And it acts as a communication pathway between the brain and the gut. And it transmits signals from the digestive system to the brain and carries those signals back to the gut and affecting everything from digestion and mood to inflammation and stress responses. Yeah, I see that, Michelle. It probably would need some genetic testing. I think that's right. Okay, so now that we have a better understanding of how the brain works, let's apply it to a change management approach that can be useful for assessing stakeholders in an organizational transition that's led to conflict. But you can also apply it to parties who are in conflict having a hard time with change. And on the next slide, you'll see the power interest matrix, which is a strategic tool used to map stakeholders based on their power to influence change as compared to their interest in it. So it was developed by Aubrey Mendelow, and it's a 4-box grid that helps identify the right approach for each stakeholder group in order to effectively engage and manage them during change. And it measures power, so the degree to which a stakeholder is able to influence strategy or implementation of a project, and that compares it to interest. So the degree of involvement or interest a stakeholder has in the success or outcome of a project. So it can be used to prioritize communication and engagement strategies, to allocate resources more effectively, and really to build stakeholder support, reduce the risks, and mitigate the conflict. So once you identify the key stakeholders, you can determine if they have the power to block or advance your change initiatives. Some may be interested in what you're doing, and others maybe don't care. But you can determine who has that high or low power to impact the project, the conflict, the mediation, and who has high or low interest, and therefore how to interact with them. So let's look at each of these quadrants. So in high power, low interest, you want to keep these important stakeholders in the loop, even though they aren't that interested or involved, because they can affect the outcomes. You want to keep them informed, but you don't want to overwhelm them with details, because they could use their power in an undesirable way. And if they become dissatisfied at some point in the project, that may have an impact on what you're trying to achieve. The next one is high power, high interest. And if you want to manage them closely. So these are the decision makers that will have influence on the success of the project. And you want to keep them engaged and involved in decision making. The low power, low interest quadrant, it's good to monitor these folks. So you don't need to actively engage them, but you want to keep an eye out for any change in their status, because if something changes there, they may have an opportunity to be more influential and in the way that things are going and in the outcome of the transition. And then there's low power, high interest. You want to keep these people informed so that there's no major issues that are emerging. You still want their support, and they could be opportunities there for feedback. So I thought we could practice using this power interest matrix together. And I'm going to present a scenario, and then we're going to discuss it on how to use it when a change is causing conflict. And let's see what you think about this. So let's review the scenario on the next slide. And here's the background. So TechSpire is a fictional, growing, mid-sized software company, and it's restructuring its product development and marketing teams in order to improve collaboration and speed up product delivery. So previously, both teams operated in silos with separate goals and reporting structures. And under this new model, they'll work as a cross-functional squad of teams reporting to a unified product director. So the conflict is that the restructuring has created tension because roles and responsibilities and decision-making powers are redefined. Team members aren't certain about their influence, and some feel that their authority is being undermined. So let's take a look at the characters in this scenario and see what their roles and perspectives are and what quadrant they fit into. So you may want to take a picture of this slide, as we'll be referring back to it when we discuss the scenario. So we have Sandra, and she is a senior product manager of the product team. She's in the high power, high interest quadrant. And so what we want to do is manage her closely. She has strong influence and high engagement. And she feels that the marketing team is encroaching on her territory in making product decisions. So she's involved in shaping this new organizational structure, but she's very resistant to sharing the decision-making with others, either on her team, but certainly across into the product development team. Then we have Carlos. He's the head of finance. He controls the budget and makes the decisions. So he's not very interested in the team dynamics. But if it impacts the budget and the costs, he feels like he does need to get involved there. So he has high power, low interest, and we need to keep him satisfied. And then we have Priya. She's the designer on the product team. She has low power and high interest. We need to keep her informed. She doesn't have a lot of influence, but she's very invested and she really cares about this project. She's passionate about human-centered design, but she doesn't feel heard. She doesn't feel as if her voice really matters much, even though she has much of the technical expertise. And then we have Tom, who's a junior marketing analyst. He's in the low power, low interest quadrant. We want to monitor, see how he's doing, but he doesn't have a whole lot of influence or interest because he's a new hire. He's focused on daily tasks, and he's really unaware of the implications of the conflict. So that's where the interests and perspectives are of each of the characters. And in the next slide, I've mapped them out on the matrix to see where they visually are and what different approaches we might need. So thank you so much for putting that information in chat. Appreciate that. So we see here that Carlos is in the high power, low interest, and we need to engage him, consult with him. We see Sandra, she's in the high power, high interest. We certainly are involving her in decision making. And then we have Tom down below. He's new. He's not really very attuned to what's happening in the dynamics of the conflict. And Priya's got a lot of interest, but not a whole lot of power. So I would like to know, thinking about the scenario, the different characters, the dynamics, this may be a pretty common scenario for those of you that work on organizational change, those of you who may be embroiled in something like this when there is restructuring in your organizations. And I'd like to know what kinds of approaches you might use. What are some initial thoughts you might have to helping navigate and use this power interest matrix to help navigate through this conflict? So if we can take a look at the next slide. So what might be some approaches? We have so many conflict resolution experts on this call in this session. What approach might you suggest in this scenario? And since we've just covered a lot of neuroscience and how the brain influences our hormonal and physiological reactions, what aspects of neuroscience do you think would be useful in applying to an approach that you would suggest for navigating through this conflict? And feel free to put it in chat, or you can raise your hand to speak into the room and we'll call on you. So I'm really wanting to tap into the expertise in the room.
So
What are some
raise your virtual hand if we
Yes,
can't
raise
see
your virtual.
you. We've already have do not criticize anyone in the chat. I'm sure people are gathering their thoughts. I saw some people taking pictures of the information on the screen.
Give you some time to think about it. So using your knowledge, expertise, Julie has an idea. Thank you, Julie. Go ahead, please.
Sorry, my camera's not working this morning.
That's okay. No
It's
worries.
very early where I am, so it just doesn't start working at 6 o'clock in the morning. It just doesn't work.
Oh, thank you for joining us so early. Appreciate that. Or late. There may be people on the call who it's very late for. Go ahead.
I am a transformative mediator, and our process with dialogue would be to start with the folks who are asking you for this initiative. So start and then ask them what their goals are, who needs to be invited in, who needs to be a part of this process. And from there, what are any sort of barriers or things to consider, that like time, if that's a constraint, and when you need to do this, and so the outcomes, the goals, those kind of things, for them to understand that that's important to them, and then uh, for them to share who else should be involved, and then contacting the next person that they're suggesting, and to hear from them, do you want to be involved in this? These are the constrictions or barriers, but what would be your goal or outcome? So something like that, I think, is really trauma informed, a person centered, really looking at people have the choice. Do they want to be involved in this dialogue or not? And you're really transparent about the process.
That's excellent, Julie. So important to be really focused on what the people in the conflict want, what their needs are, really doing that needs assessment, and getting that feedback is critical. Thank you so much. I see Dr. Barbara Sunderland. Go ahead, please.
Manuso. Hi.
Manuso. Hi.
Wonderful presentation. Absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
Use a lot of the transformative model. And what I have also found to be very effective is to tell people, let's stop the process, to take them out of the conflict process and ask them maybe how they got to their job, what made them think to go into whatever the area was. So I get them to talk about themselves, hoping that we can find a common denominator. So it takes the top and the bottom and kind of merges them into more of a social setting. And then people can often relax a little bit. They don't feel like they're being put into a conflict, a fight, and they reset themselves. I think everything that you just said within the brain, it helps them reset everything. They calm down. They like to talk about themselves. And when they re-engage, the trajectory is more conciliatory. So that would be the approach. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really right. It's that human to human connection. And, we all have the same kind of brain, more or less, with some variation. And so leveling that out for humans and being able to have more of a relation and relationship to each other, to understand each other just as human to human. And one thing that I do in my mediation as well is I like to use an appreciative approach. So one question I will ask the parties, and you're making me think of this, Barbara, is when you got along fine and you work together well, or if it's a personal mediation around divorce or something else, a community mediation, what did you appreciate about that other person? What worked well? How did you interact? What could you see about the qualities and skills of that other person or persons that really contributed to whatever it is that you were working on? And to your point, what that does is it does soften. It's like, oh yes, we remember that memory, right, which is coming in the entorhinal cortex. And that can help start to bridge that gap as well. So thank you for that comment. I know we have a lot in chat.
We have another person who wanted to chime in.
Please.
Another Susan.
Okay.
Gartner. Would you unmute yourself?
Okay, yes. Thank you. Also, I'll say this presentation just goosebumps. I have chills. I'm loving it so much.
Oh, thank you so much.
The first thing I do is do a similar presentation that you're doing to level the playing field because people do not have this knowledge and do not
Right,
have this information.
right.
So that's the first thing I do. The
Mm.
second thing I do, I kind of love Priya's idea of human-centered design approach. And I really, yeah, I just see a lot of value in that. But I just would level this playing field so people actually had this information and knowledge like what you're giving to us. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Susan. I really appreciate you saying that because I really feel strongly too that if more humans understood what's going on in these initial instinctual reptilian brain of ours, because we all have it, no matter what our background is, it, as you say, it can really start to level the playing field. And maybe from there, that's where your expertise, everybody in this session, can come in to help guide people to move beyond that. Because if we recognize that, once we're aware of what's happening and to know it's not our own volition or our choice, at least initially, then you start at a whole different place, don't you?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so,
And
yeah.
one of the things I use in the work that I've done is to get people to understand, like a quick way to get the thoughts you're having, a reaction, a response you're having out of the reptilian part of your brain into the cortex is tilt your head. Tilt your head. It's
Huh.
just this little reminder, like you could be in a meeting, so no one's going to notice you're not taking a breath or doing anything, but you tilt your head is a reminder to gravity will draw that energy down to your cortex. So that was one of the ways I taught that. So
I love that. Thank you so much. You taught me something. I knew that would happen here. That is such a fantastic, it's like, yeah, pulling it down to the prefrontal cortex. It's fabulous. Thank you, Susan. That's great. Any other hands where people want to, electronic hands where they want to speak into the room?
And if you can't figure out the electronic hand, just message in the chat and we can facilitate passage of you. Old school Zoom.
I see Anne has a really interesting perspective in chat around Tom. So he's the least invested in the change. So Anne, if you don't mind, would you come off of mute and tell us what your reasoning is to focus on Tom? Tell us more.
Sure. My thought was all the other players here have a vested interest in some scenario moving forward, and it doesn't appear from the fact pattern that he does. So I think he could be a very good collaborator with the mediator because right now he doesn't appear to have any particular stick in the fire.
Hmm.
And I think when you can work in partnership, obviously maintaining a neutrality, which we need to be sensitive to, but maybe he can assist in addressing the problem in a way with some of the other players to assist with the buy-in.
Hmm. Very interesting. Thank you, Anne. It's almost like he's got fresh eyes. He's got a fresh perspective because he's a new hire. He might see some things that people embroiled in it may not see. Thank you. Appreciate that. And I see in chat, hearing people's thoughts on the change, asking them for feedback. I think it's Maya. Decision directly affects someone like Priya, who can bring her into the discussion. Excellent. Mayo, do you want to say any more? Elaborate on your point at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
So I think when you've got people who are directly affecting your bottom line, who are directly participating in the activities that are going to, who are going to be so directly affected, and more importantly, who want a voice in the room, because I noticed from the blurb that we got about Priya that Priya doesn't feel like her voice is being heard. Priya her need needs to be addressed. Her need to have her voice in the room needs to be addressed somehow, either by, oh God, who was it? Sandra kind of taking her information and bringing it to the table, or by Sandra saying, you know what? You do a lot of work for us. Why don't you be our representative from the staff?
So to give her some more responsibility, because she also has the expertise
Yeah.
and the knowledge.
Yeah. She is as important as somebody like Sandra, who probably has more of a top-down view. Priya is right in the mix of things, and she's doing the work. She is the nose to the grindstone person.
Right, exactly. And I think that, as mediators and practitioners, if we were to bring the whole group together, which probably would be one of the steps we'd take, we can set up some of those norms and guidelines, ground rules, right? That all voices are need to be heard and need to be voiced. And certainly as the facilitator, practitioner, we'd want to be paying attention to that and to recognize, as you say, Maya, that if somebody feels like they're not heard, we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. And people process information differently, right? Some people like to express what they're thinking as they're thinking it, quick on their seat, I say. And some people like to take information in. They want to see how others respond. They want to give themselves some time to reflect and dig into their knowledge, and they don't speak that fast or as readily. So I think it's important as practitioners to also take into account people's different styles for internalizing information.
Maybe a staff survey would be helpful.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for that. So I see here also, since this is a multi-party mediation setting, would like to try some circle processes along with typical mediation. Oh, circle processes. Like to hear more about that and allow everybody a better understanding of the perspectives. Liz, would you? I know I'm calling on folks. I hope that's okay to ask you to elaborate on some of your points, because this is an opportunity for all of us to learn from each other.
Did you mean Lou?
I'm sorry, Lou. I said Lou. I mean,
okay.
I didn't say Lou. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's so funny because someone from the UK had the same exact thought. So circle processes are where you have a circle, per se. You have a talking stick or some kind of talking item that you can pass. So everybody talks and you ask kind of prompts to get the same answer, or not the same answer, but you get, I'm trying to say this right. You have a prompt that elicits answers from everybody. So everybody's perspective is heard right away. The people who have less power are brought up because they have a chance to say what they need to. Nobody can interrupt. Only the person having the talking stick or the talking piece can talk. Everyone else has to listen. So it's about talking and listening. And so you kind of even out the power imbalances that way, because everybody has a chance to be heard. And it's a way to kind of start, and you just kind of do a couple rounds with prompts and then do some actual typical mediation, and might end up with some prompts, some other prompts, or have a couple in the meantime that have come to your mind that might focus in better. So this kind of the circle process. It evens out the power imbalances and allows everybody a chance to speak and everybody else a chance to listen. I guess that's the easiest way to describe it.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. And love the use of the talking stick from Native American practices, that person who has the stick then holds the floor. And I really appreciate that sense of those who have less power able to speak first. And I'm just wondering, Lou, how do you identify that? How do you identify the people with less power?
I'm not so sure that they would speak first. It's just that they all have the ability to speak, instead of somebody monopolizing the conversation so much. everybody has that ability to speak and be heard. So I don't know. I think you might have pre-identified who might go first by looking at, kind of what you said, the information you already have. So you might allow that person to go first, or it might be easier for someone else to start and then to chime in afterwards. I'm not really sure how I would do that, whether I would make it a point to make the person with the less power go first, or just give them that opportunity in that round, just as everybody else has that opportunity.
Sure. And maybe you can use the power interest matrix to do some planning, assuming, that you have been working with the stakeholders and you know where you might place them in that quadrant, and then really think about some of the strategies for that. So thank you so much, Lou, for that.
That's one of the questions. I'm sorry, I'm going to ask a question on top of that. That's one of the questions that came up later, was kind of, does anyone use a lot, I don't know, in our agency, we don't usually get a lot of pre-meetings. In fact, we rarely have any pre-meetings with the participants. So you just get what they have told you verbally, or not told you, but told the coordinator verbally. I'm wondering, and someone else was wondering, how many people have pre-meetings with the participants ahead of time? The actual mediators, not the coordinators, but the actual mediators have meetings with the participants ahead of time.
Maybe people could raise their virtual hands to give us a sense of the response to that.
Got a lot of hands up.
A lot of hands.
Oh my.
Yeah. Wow.
All right.
Excellent. Does anybody with a hand up want to speak to the value of being able to do that? Is that something that comes with the process of the organization you're working with? Is that something you ask for? Anyone want to speak to that? I know we've got a lot of hands up, but feel free to come off of mute. Share that if you'd like.
Shy hands. Carmen, would you like to go first, or?
Sure. So first of all, thank you so much for this presentation. It's been invaluable.
Thank you.
I think it depends on what the theme is of the mediation. So for example, if it's a family and divorce mediation, I initially meet with each of the parties for several reasons. One is to do a domestic violence screening. But the other reason is to help take, a lot of them have never experienced mediation. So if I offer them the opportunity to speak with me one-on-one, to understand what the process is, to ask their questions, to just be heard in that setting, it helps lower the temperature. It helps calm them down. So that's one approach in the family and divorce. I also, of course, meet with counsel, whether it's in the family divorce setting or in a commercial case. Those are kind of more interesting, because in those cases, sometimes you want to find out what's the dynamic between the attorneys. And sometimes it seems like a silly question, but I can't tell you how much I've learned from this is, what's the history between the two of you? How many cases have you had together? And I did have one case where, in fact, one lawyer said, I can't stand her, about the other lawyer. So anyway, I don't want to take up any more time, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Carmen, for that perspective. And the other thing I think that it helps to do is it builds trust with you as the mediator, because they then get a sense of who you are. They're not coming into that joint meeting cold and not knowing anything about the mediator. So I think that's really, really critical and interesting about the dynamics between the lawyers, or I've seen dynamics between union officials in some mediations that I've done. So the more information we gather, I do think, is totally helpful. I see Jeremy's hand up, and I know, Jeremy, as you mentioned before we started the official presentation, you have a lot of experience on the use of neuroscience, and conflict. So looking forward to what you have to share with us.
First of all, thank you so much, Susan, for the presentation.
Pleasure.
I think we're hearing a lot of techniques that work extremely well, and then trying to put them back into kind of a neuroscience perspective. I look at this in terms of, and coming back to your question about pre-meetings and why pre-meetings are useful, I look at this as really trying to set up not so much how do you overcome the activation hurdle of resistance to change, but more how do you activate innate heuristics that everybody has, and build on plasticity of one set of heuristics to go for another set of heuristics. So just focusing for a moment on the question of a pre-meeting, I find that having people discuss process issues independently of substantive issues helps. It helps to, and I work along 3 heuristics and opposing patterns within them. There's the emotional level. First of all, is this a reward for me? Is this a danger for me? And the more we are able to get them to focus on this as a reward opportunity versus a threat opportunity, you will help to overcome that resistance. On the second level, I'm looking at this from a social perspective. How do we work in group as opposed to out of group? And already with the chart that you have, we could almost be mapping different tribes within the organization. Who's marketing, who's sales, how do you bring everybody together? And within the notion of tribe, there's also a notion of power. And we can very often misunderstand who has power, because all it takes is somebody's been long in the company, they're friends with the CEO or the founder, they mentioned during a coffee break or at a bar what happened, and you find that your power matrix assessment is completely out of whack. So I think it's really useful to have these pre-meetings to also understand who the protagonists are and what the reactions to things are. And the third reason why I like pre-meetings is also to get people to drop that. Somebody was commenting about the Jimmy Carter test of, you ask 3 times the same question to get a no answer first.
Change, I'll be right down.
But the idea is really you get straight to that third level of thinking and get people to innovate on process, because discussing process is a lot less threatening to people. And so I find it's a great opportunity to build an in-group script, to get people to think about common reward, and then also to start to think in a new way and in practical way of how we're going to think in a creative way, improvising as opposed to kind of positional bargaining type logic.
Thank you so much for that, Jeremy. I'm also thinking of an organizational situation I was working on this week with an organization of partners. And there was a lot of conflict, and we spent a lot of time in that concept of a dialogue circle to find out what the issues are and let them hear from each other how they see these perspectives. And as we know, and the brain needs to fill its narrative and fill itself with stories. And of course, and somebody mentioned this in chat, there's always so many assumptions made, because the brain needs to fill that vacuum of a lack of information. And so after there was a lot of voicing of what had happened and transpired and the need to speak to these experiences and what had happened and let, really deep listening happening, then to your point, Jeremy, they got into problem solving. We identified the issues, we grouped those into and prioritized those, and then they were in small groups. This is part of this organizational situation and conflict, and they came up with solutions. And once we have people, as we do in mediation, because it's about that self-determination of providing those solutions to each other, offering them to each other, and the self-determination of allowing them to decide on the way forward, it can be bonding. By the end of this meeting this week, they were leaving the meeting. I mean, you could feel the tension dropping, talking about next steps. And it really was a way to help them gel with each other, because they have important work to do.
And that's how the journey is sometimes more important than the initial destination that you've planned, is getting people just to talk and have these smaller groups helps it. But I do think that in the very beginning, when you are having these setup meetings, you don't know what the dynamics are going to be like. it's also important for people to talk about what they want to be able to work together socially effectively. So, I think having meals, having, social experiences that allow for, all this to be kind of separated, discussed, worked out, makes a lot of sense. And so to the questions of people who are saying, why do you have a pre-meeting? Why do you not have a pre-meeting? I can encourage more pre-meetings because I do think it makes a huge difference when you're able to look at the dynamics, not only in terms of the emotion and the power structure, but also in terms of the social dynamics you want to create. Do you want to help people to work as one team with a sense of common goals? Or are you really trying to think of them as different departments and here's the power to affect change and to keep the others kind of limited knowledge, limited information so that they can't get in the way? And that, but very often it comes back to bite you when you've misunderstood the power matrix.
Absolutely. And I think the pre-meetings, when I do a needs assessment for an organizational change, the thing that is really important is I will also ask for input into the development of, say, an agenda that I would be creating in order to help bring the parties together or make a transition or whatever it is. And so they feel some ownership and buy-in to it. And then I understand, it would be non-attribution, but I look for common themes that I then like to report back to the group. So they also have some feedback on the various different kinds of interviews that I would have been doing.
And I'll say one more thing, I'll be quiet,
Okay.
but we did a study 2 years ago at University of Geneva with some neuroscientists, and we found that just asking people to talk about the future for 1 minute, what it might look like, actually shifted the plasticity of an antisocial behavior, kind of an out-of-group behavior, to a pro-group, an in-group behavior. So there are little things we can do, like appreciate-based inquiry is a perfect example of that. Little things that we can do that we know 15 to 20 minutes later on will see a real impact on the group dynamics, because they do shift some of these innate heuristics by simply having people's attention focused towards something different, and that allows more compassion and empathy to be built in unconsciously. None of this is happening consciously. And it makes it difficult for us because we have to be careful not to manipulate too much. We're trying to help people get there, but there is something a bit dangerous with the neuroscience that we have to think about is, to what extent are we pushing on buttons that people want us to push on? And to what extent are we manipulating people without their understanding it? And I think that's something we have to get to the more we understand neuroscience.
Thank you. That's really important. It reminds me too of neurolinguistic programming. Is that used for enhancing communication or some manipulation? And I see David's comment in chat where he says to be careful not to be condescending. And I think that is really critically important as well. So how we approach it, what we say, I even think very strongly about asking parties, well, what is your side of this of the conflict? I try to stay, away from some of those words that continue to divide the parties, right? Because if we think about words creating reality, it's super important for us, mediators and practitioners to really be cognizant of that. And I'm seeing in chat, oh, great. Let me just see. Excellent. If you had the opportunity to speak to each participant. Great. Yes. Please go ahead. Is it Felicitas?
Yes, yes. I apologize for the camera. I don't have my camera on, but
no problem.
Your presentation is so provocative. As you can see, everybody is asking questions.
Thank you.
I have two different questions that have nothing to do with one topic and the other. But the first one is, now in the using AI so much that people use AI for the solutions, and when they become, the comments are very savvy and very, so how do you manage with neuroscience to deal with the brain and AI? And that's one question. And the other one is, I like to know more what happens to the cerebellum. If you haven't mentioned that, how important is the cerebellum for the thoughts or emotions? If it's possible for you to comment on that. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you for that question. So one of the things that I read about recently with AI is that it's getting so sophisticated, more and more, more and more complex, more and more sophisticated, in that AI is now able to work on its own self-preservation. I'm not sure what the emotional component of that is. I think probably that's what we take out of AI, but it is learning how to preserve itself and being able to replicate itself. So in addition to just providing this information that we look for when we go into these various different programs, and there was a great session on AI that this roundtable did last month with Jim Melamood. Might not be pronouncing his name right. But it's like, unfortunately, it seems like it's like the sci-fi movies about taking over. So the question is, right, with AI, and maybe there's somebody who's really entrenched in that and knows in this room, is that where is the emotional component? Where is the empathy? If it is so based on, the sophisticated algorithms, and especially in the work that we do to resolve conflict, the emotional component, the way that, the brain is triggering these reactions, how is AI really going to be able to incorporate that? It can assist us, right? And it can help us with even some of our administrative tasks, et cetera, or how to phrase questions, et cetera. But I wonder about that future of AI in terms of its ability to not only preserve itself, but to perhaps manipulate. So your second question about the cerebellum, do you mean the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and I'm wondering what part of the brain you might be talking about in terms of, like, the entorhinal cortex?
No, really, the cerebellum, which is, well, you know better, but I mean, the function of the cerebellum, that is below the cortex, right? Yes.
Well, it's really interesting. They've done experiments where, you have the right and the left side of the brain. And when you sever one or the other, the right side is more of your creative, language, innovative side. The left side is your rational, logical decision-making side. When you sever it, it has really fascinating impact on behavior. So it can really change if you're compartmentalizing one part of the hemisphere or the other. The behavior that results is really, really something. And interestingly, I've been really reading some more and interested in intuition. And one of the things that I've looked into is the fact that we definitely tend to be more focused on our left side of our brain, right? The rational, logical decision-making side. And the right side is, we use it less. And in fact, what we know from the research is we're not really using our full capacity of our brain anyway. We use a very, very small part of it. So how do we tap more into that intuitive side? And as mediators, conflict practitioners, that's a lot of what we're invoking when we are facilitating and mediating these conflicts, right? We need to also trust that gut, that saying, which, of course, if you think about the vagus nerve, there is that interconnection. And so I think that tapping into that intuition can be really useful for us. Okay, so I'm just looking at chat, minding the time. We have about 7 minutes left, and then there's a few more things I want to cover. Yes, the appreciative inquiry, motivational interviewing strategies. Great, thank you for that. Nikki, am I missing any questions?
There have been such a flood of questions, but I think, it'll be a continuing conversation necessarily. And if you want to finish your slides, it might be.
Sure. Okay.
And then maybe we can have a few seconds for questions at the last minute. But
let's do that. Yeah, I don't have too much more, so we can continue to have the questions. And I hope we'll save the chat.
The chat is always part of the resources. It's one of the reasons why I try and nourish it with as many interesting links and encourage people to post. The public chat is always PDF'd and downloadable alongside the recording, which will all be on our YouTube channel.
Fantastic. Nikki, you're so good at that, I have to say. That's amazing. And also the slides will be shared too, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Great. Okay, so let's just, these questions and comments are fantastic. Thank you, everybody. I'll just finish up and hopefully we have a few more minutes for some more questions and comments. So we know this organizational context, this scenario, very common, right? And we know change is inevitable and resistance often results. And, you know, we humans really constantly struggle between our curious nature and the basic need we have to have reliability, dependability, and familiarity, because our brains are evolutionarily designed to favor that, to favor stability and familiarity, to survive, you know, and that's problematic in this rapidly changing world. I mean, the world's always been changing, but it seems like as we move along, it becomes more and more turbulent. And so we live in that VUCA world, VUCA. Does anyone know what that acronym stands for? And if you do, can you just put it in chat? A VUCA world. See if we have some folks who know that. Volatile, yep. Uncertainty. That's it. Yeah. Let's go to that next slide. Da 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 da. Absolutely, you've got it. So volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And this is the reality. And so here we are at this very challenging juxtaposition where the brain is resisting change, and yet we've got to deal with change all the time. And so it can make us feel uncomfortable. And yet at the same time, we want to grow and learn while staying safe and preserving ourselves in a world that's just swirling around us, right? So that's where your experience and expertise as conflict resolution practitioners are so important in this very, very complex world. So as we wrap up, let's review what I've covered. I explored neuroscience and parts of the brain. Not all parts, of course, it's much more complex, but we do see why we are hardwired to resist change and why situations can escalate so quickly into those negative consequences. We also looked at how change can lead to conflict, and conflict does make us need to change. And then I offered some practical approaches like the PRC method and the power interest matrix. And so thinking about all that we've covered, and next slide, what would be one thing that you want to do to implement some kind of action based on what we have talked about in this session? So if you go ahead and just write it down, can write it under your signature that you changed hands on or wherever, and just something that would be useful and practical for today's learning. Let me give you a moment for that. Thank you, Elena. Power interest matrix, great. Yeah, feel free to write something in chat. Glad it's a good tool. Fantastic. Thank you. Watch the recording, the PRC, wonderful. So glad to hear it. Excellent. So as others may be thinking about their next step, let's go to the next slide. And I think this is just a really great quote that we can all remember, which is between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So sometimes go slow to go faster is a really useful thing to remember. This is by Viktor Frankl, who is a neurologist, psychologist, philosopher, and a Holocaust survivor. Next slide, please. Here are some resources. If you want to, you can take a picture of this now. You'll be getting the slides, so you'll have it. And let me let you do that. And then the very last slide is thanking you all so much for your time and participation here, sharing your knowledge. Here's my contact information. And I see we're almost at the top of the hour. But I understand, and I can stay on a little bit longer if people want to have more questions and more discussion. So over to you, Nikki.
So I think we're pretty much at the top of the hour and want to just take this opportunity with Maria to thank you so much for an incredibly engaging and interesting conversation that might merit some sort of a part two. Thank you for your time, and thank you for everybody to have engaged so much. The chat is going to be a novella on its own, full of different choose your own adventures for resources and ideas and comments. And we just want to thank you. I think we'll stick around for like another 5 minutes or so. I have to go pretty quickly, but anybody that wants to hop around, we'll stop the recording and have a few minutes of informal chat. Maria, do you have anything to add?
I want to echo everything that you said, Nikki. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Susan, for a really wonderful, wonderful presentation. And you'll see all of the accolades in the chat. Thank you again.
My
And-
pleasure.
All
And
right.
we will now turn off the recording. We will be on informally for just a few minutes, and then we will end the call. Any quick comments or